सब्सक्राइब करिए लर्न फॉर एग्जाम चैनल को एंड बेल आइकन को दबाइए एजुकेशनल वीडियोस सबसे पहले देखने के लिए।
Hi guys, am I audible? Great. So I'm taking a quiet time here, guys. I'm just wanting you to be comfortable around the interface. आप लोग आवाज बहुत clearly आ रही है? You're able to see there's a document that I've put up which starts with Mr. Secret Keeper is a corporate head HR in a company. बाकी लोग किसी को नहीं दिख रहा डॉक्यूमेंट? ठीक है, एक मिनट दो आप मुझे बस। आप दिख रहा है? ठीक है, fair. So I don't need a document right now. Ideally, I'll plan something. I'll just start sharing it once again, and let me know if this is visible. Otherwise, we'll start the agenda of the class today. बाकी लोग audible हूं ना मैं? Right? Great. ठीक है, guys. So here is what I would do today, guys, is just to set the agenda. I'll be taking one more class. I mean, the classes that were promised, I'll do a +1 class to them. ठीक है? Count it as a newer gift or whatever it is, because it's funny. It's pleasure interacting with all of you and doing this case discussion. So you guys fairly know what a group discussion is. Have a fair amount of idea what a group discussion is. ठीक है? And possibly you haven't heard of case discussion a lot of times, right? जब GD सुना होगा, CD नहीं ही सुना होगा, right? Except for when you possibly started to think seriously about NMAT, I guess तभी आला होगा, right? With Hindi, guys, do let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep it a mix of English. ठीक है? I'll use more of English and less of Hindi. But थोड़े से jokes मैं हिंदी में मारूंगा. कुछ jokes का meaning हिंदी में समझ में आएगा. I'll translate it into English, but then joke will not remain a joke. Fair? So any idea of what a case discussion is? I'll just have your inputs here before we start things. What do you think of a case discussion and how is it going to be a different thing from GD? Those are the two broader things I'm trying to focus on. Fair. Is it always a complex business situation? Is it always a business situation? Okay, fair. Some case. It could be an ethical situation at the same time. It can just be a real life situation. But most of the time, it's a B school case discussion, right? So I'm sure you know that your 2 years of your state MBA would be largely driven by case discussions, right? You would be given a case discussion. You would be given a case, and then you have to make a PPT on it. And then you have to present it in the class. That's how it happens. Okay, so I'll tell you a quick example here. When I was doing my MBA, so what used to happen was, at least at my college, we have something called as a pigeon box. So pigeon boxes are small locker kind of things where you have your name written, you have your roll number, and there's something called as GP office, the graduate program office. What happens there is everything, your scorecard, your assessment sheets, your examination sheets are dropped in that pigeon box. Right, and anyone can open anyone's pigeon box. I used to keep it locked. There are people who don't want to share their marks. I was one of them, at least at the first trimester. But then I realized I'm going to be a 5-pointer, 6-pointer. I'm not going to be a 7-pointer, so I kept my locker open. But then there were guys who used to keep it very close. So what happens is, in the night at 10 o'clock around, the GP office comes down and drops a case discussion. The case discussion often runs in hundreds of pages, guys. Okay? It often runs in 100 of pages, and those 100 of pages mein, what do you have to do is you have to sum the complete case discussion in 5 slides. Am I making sense here? I'm just giving you a practical situation of what case discussions actually are. Am I audible, guys? ठीक है. So remember 100 pages की case discussion को पढ़ के you have to summarize it into 5 slides, right? So the first thing that is going to be difficult obviously is to read 100 slides, and remember the professor set a deadline like 4 o'clock in the morning. So look at it from a purely practical situation. At 10 o'clock suddenly you get a mail from GP office that there is a case discussion on marketing management that has been dropped in your pigeon boxes. Please pick up the cases and submit a PPT of not more than 5 slides by 4 o'clock. Professor must सोता रहता है 4 बजे तक, 6 बजे तक, 8 बजे तक, and when he comes down in the class he gets a printout of each of the group presentations with the timestamp. अगर किसी का 40101 होता है तो वो उसको डिस्क्वालीफाई कर देता है. That's the kind of life B schools have. So obviously you're not going to get those 100 page of case discussions. It's going to be a very simple case discussion. So देखो case discussion normally क्या होता है जो आपको 100 pages या 70-80 pages के होते हैं. Do you have a fair amount of idea how a case discussion looks like? कैसे होता है, क्या क्या उसमें अलग अलग topics होते हैं, documents होते हैं? Any idea on that? So I'll tell you, ठीक है? So I'm going to start with a lengthy case idea and then I'll tell you what is the relevant portion in the case जो आपको NMIMS short form करके देता है, ठीक है? And then I'll take you through कि हाँ, you can relate it to DM of that, Gaurav. The only difference is कि वहां पे थोड़ा सा decision making वाला part होता है. You are expected to be ethical. यहाँ पे obviously we are expected to be ethical, but we are expected to be more than ethical and make business sense as well. ठीक है? So obviously we'll take some cues from the decision making of that, but we'll also have some business sense here. And remember, we don't have options here, right? Plus, do you kind of relate this कि अगर आपके पास 209 नंबर हैं और 209 नंबर पे is the cutoff, and there's someone who's got a 212, 214, 215, 226, everyone will shout at the top of their voice. Do we agree? GDs या case discussion हो कुछ भी हो, everyone would want to speak, everyone would scream at the top of your voice. मैं आपको कितना भी बोलता चलूं, don't make it a fish market, but at the end of the day it happens, and I completely agree. अगर मुझे इतनी मेहनत करने के बाद एक कॉल आया होगा, मैं अपने बगल वाले को गोली मार दूं, यहाँ तो फिर भी चिल्लाने की बात है. That's somehow I use it as an anecdote कि मैं तो गोली मार दूं, ये तो फिर भी चिल्लाने की बात है, right? And आप कितना भी कर लो, नहीं नहीं and all that stuff, people will shout, and if people will shout, you'll have to ensure that you get heard at least. Fair? So look at this, a 20 or the 30 page case studies normally starts with a background. ठीक है? So क्या background को पढ़ने की या background आपको NMIMS देगा? This is background of the company that the case would be about. Do you think this is relevant when you're discussing the course, the case in 10 minutes, in 12 minutes, in 15 minutes? Do you think it would be relevant? Right? No? Do we agree? Not really, right? So the problem that the company would be facing will possibly have no direct relationship with the background of the company, right? Then what will happen is, a small introduction. This would be introduction of the company, what the company is doing right now in terms of purely simple things, not about the case here. Again, not very relevant, right? ठीक है? The next thing, guys, that you will get on the case discussion is, normal case discussion is a brief history of the company, how the company has grown, what kind of companies LOB are, line of businesses and all that stuff. Do you think it's relevant? Not really, right? Absolutely fine with it, because history में कुछ भी हुआ हो सकता है, थोड़ा बहुत फर्क पड़े, but largely history से शायद current situation की problem को उतना फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, right? Fairly fine. जहां भी guys कुछ भी दिक्कत हो मुझे वहीं रोक के पूछ लेना. We'll do a very exhaustive discussions here. ठीक? Then what happens is, normally the case discussion will have a problem. The problem statement. Do you think this is where the game starts? Right? Fair? So the first thing first, guys, here. Do you think problem explicitly लिखी होगी या implied होगी? Problem. Implied होगी? गौरव, प्रॉब्लम एक्सप्लिसिट होगी, उसके रीजंस इंप्लाइड होंगे या प्रॉब्लम भी इंप्लाइड होगी? बहुत ध्यान से सुनना, प्रॉब्लम इंप्लाइड होगी, प्रॉब्लम के पीछे के रीजंस, प्रॉब्लम एक्सप्लिसिट होगी ना? रिमेंबर, देयर आर टू वेरी डिफरेंट थिंग्स. व्हेन आई आस्क यू प्रॉब्लम का स्टेटमेंट, रीजंस शायद इंप्लाइड होंगे या एक्चुअल रीजन शायद इंप्लाइड होंगे, जो भी होगा, राइट? रीजंस इंप्लाइड होंगे, फेयर। प्रॉब्लम के बाद डू यू थिंक द केस विल स्टॉप हेयर ओनली, या प्रॉब्लम का भी कुछ बैकग्राउंड दिया जाएगा? कुछ दिया जाएगा, राइट? बैकग्राउंड दिया जाएगा कि पिछले 1 साल से हो रही है, या कुछ हुआ है, नहीं हुआ है। ये भी हो सकता है ये दिया जाए दैट द कंपनी ट्राइड सॉल्विंग इट, राइट? कंपनी ने ऐसा कुछ किया, नहीं होता था नॉर्मली, सो दे विल मेक इट लिटिल डिफिकल्ट फॉर यू, right? So just to give you an example, there is a very big company called PUL. ठीक है, this is a acronym, this is a analogy to HUL, which is a big multinational FMCG that hires from campuses. आपको पता है ना HUL FMCG सब पता है, right? थोड़ा बहुत, right? It's one of the desired companies. ठीक. So what happened is HUL is one of the most desired companies on campuses, at least on the top 10 campuses. So they really have a very good MT program, management training का program. Do you know how these marketing companies function? 1 साल का आपका स्टेंट होता है, 3 महीने का सेल्स, 3 महीने का कॉर्पोरेट ऑफिस, 3 महीने का HR, 3 महीने का ऑपरेशंस, एंड देन दे अलॉट यू टू अ एरिया विद अ स्पेसिफिक सेल्स का फंक्शन। तो हो सकता है यूर सेलिंग पॉन्ड्स का क्रीम, यूर सेलिंग टाइड, यूर सेलिंग सर्फ, वॉट एवर इट इज। ठीक है, सो डू यू थिंक HUL में जो हायर या PUL में जो लोग हायर होते होंगे वो कंपनी छोड़ते होंगे, भले टॉप 20 स्कूल ग्रेड्स हो? डू यू थिंक छोड़ते होंगे बहुत जल्दी, 1 साल, 6 महीने, 2 साल के अंदर? नहीं ना, right? Why? It's a good brand, it's one of the biggest brands to have on your resume, right? Multi geographical company, multi functional company, और इनका MT प्रोग्राम बहुत सॉर्टेड होगा, राइट? यू वुड क्लियरली सी योर करियर ग्रोथ। मतलब आई डोंट सी अ लॉजिकल पर्सन, लोग की अपनी प्रॉब्लम्स होती होंगी, शादी वादी हो गई, कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो गई, बट डू यू थिंक द रेट ऑफ अट्रीशन फॉर PUL विल बी हाई और विल बी ऑन द लोअर साइड इवन फ्रॉम द टॉप 20 स्कूल ग्रेजुएट्स? लो, राइट? एंड ऑब्वियसली देव लर्नड कि कई बार उनका एमटी प्रोग्राम बहुत हाई हो गया होगा। नाउ व्हाट आई टोल्ड टेल यू इज कि 2017 के जितने भी ग्रेजुएट्स थे, PUL picked up 70 people from top campuses, ठीक है, and more than half of them have left it. This is a big number. More than half left in 7-8 months, right? Not given, Amit. Remember the problem would be explicit. ये ऐसे ही लिखा होगा. Remember, I'm just defining the problem statement here. I'm not going to the reasons and all. ठीक है? What do you do? Suppose this is what you get to know. You know the background of the company, you know the introduction of the company, you know the brief history of the company, and then I'll also tell you the recruitment process. ठीक है? I'll tell you the recruitment process that happens at top B school. और उसमें ज्यादा कुछ चेंज नहीं हुआ है। ठीक है, I'm saying कि पिछले 10 सालों से जो मैं रिक्रूटमेंट प्रोसेस करता आ रहा हूं at top IIMs, the same process, same kind of people joined in. So इतना दे दिया जाएगा that there has been a high attrition, more than half of the left out of 70 top campuses. You are the HR head. What would you do? यहाँ क्वेश्चन खत्म है, आप बताओ क्या क्या करोगे? ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है। तो ऐसा करते हैं गाइस, मैं एक बार छोटा छोटा लिखना स्टार्ट कर दूं आपके पॉइंट्स, ठीक है, ताकि एक बार ढंग से डिस्कस करते चलेंगे। फेयर? यू काइंड ऑफ गेट दिस कि मैंने क्या बोला है, राइट? सो लेट्स स्टार्ट राइटिंग दिस, ठीक है? सो द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट यू गाइस टेल मी इज टू फाइंड आउट द रीजन, राइट? थोड़ा सा एनालिसिस करें अच्छे से, एक एक करके एनालिसिस करें, ठीक है? फाइंड आउट द रीजन, इस पर रखते हैं, ठीक? पहले ये था सबके पहले, डू वी एग्री कि ये सबसे पहली चीज होनी चाहिए, ठीक है? ना फाइंड आउट द रीजन में वुड यू डू इट योरसेल्फ, वुड यू क्रिएट अ कमिटी, या क्या करोगे? ठीक है, सो आई विल क्रिएट अ कमिटी। कमिटी के मेंबर्स कौन कौन? HR कौन? HR हेड, ठीक है। सो आई प्लस द मैनेजर्स। कौन से मैनेजर्स? उनके रिपोर्टिंग मैनेजर्स, राइट? फंक्शनल हेड्स, या राइट? What if guys, what if the managers tell you that they don't have time for this? Remember, you're the HR head. You're not the marketing head. What do you do? ठीक है. Email feedback. ठीक है. Do you talk to the MD and bitch about it? This would look like that only, right? Do you think this would look like a bitching वाली चीज? That decision making हल्का से याद करो ना. You don't escalate, right? You possibly try to go. Remember, Vivek, would you be able to do it yourself? Only yourself? Remember, you would only get to know about people who were hired for the HR function. You possibly do not know, right? सेल्स के टारगेट बहुत ज्यादा दे दी गए एकदम से, तो आपको नहीं पता चलेगा ना, आप शायद ना समझ नहीं पाओगे उस चीज को एज एन एचआर हेड, राइट? सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल आई रिक्वेस्ट द मैनेजर्स, राइट? डू वी एग्री? बिकॉज उन्होंने पहली बार मना किया, उन्होंने डांटा नहीं है आपको. यू विल रिक्वेस्ट द मैनेजर्स. Even if that doesn't happen, you will possibly ask them to send a representative. Can we do that? Remember, it's a corporate setup. और मैं कह रहा हूं कि मीटिंग में वो कह रहे हैं कि मेरे पास टाइम ही नहीं आगे आगे कोऑर्डिनेट करने का. I'm saying you want me to do a 2-month due diligence on why the MTs left. I don't have that much of time. Remember, the people will always shrug off responsibilities like this. And kind of makes sense. These guys are sales head, right? Sales heads are really tight on numbers. And HR might not understand this, but remember, a sales head is really, really tight on numbers, right? Anything what the sales guy would actually not end up spending focusing on sale will possibly have some kind of effect on the revenue generation. Agreed? Well, then a sales is more of all about numbers, going to the market, hitting the market, and you involve them in traditional operational work, there would be a problem, right? So I won't start shouting at them. I won't escalate this. I would actually request them, or possibly do an email feedback, or email feedback या phone का feedback. Email or phone, what do you prefer? And tell me the reasons behind it. Why email? That's an official thing, right? Everything you should have a written confirmation. Agreed? Or data points वहीं से आएंगे ना? Plus, even if I am an ethical person, I might not recall everything that you tell me on phone, right? Plus, exactly, in a tangible form. Plus, this should always be from the official email ID, right? You should form the questionnaire yourself, right? Because these guys always have a limit on time, और आप questionnaire खुद बना के दोगे, because obviously at the end of the day, attrition is your primary responsibility, right? To create a good organization culture with the help of sales head managers. Fair? Do we agree here? That's the first thing you're going to do committee mein. You are going to be with the managers. You possibly are going to play the lead role. Agreed? So हमें समझ में आया what do I not need to do? I won't be escalating this. I won't be leaving out the sales managers from this. I can't do that na, guys. I can't simply leave out the sales managers, right? Because obviously they are going to be an important stakeholder. That means सबसे पहले मैंने क्या सीखा है अभी, that I need to find out the stakeholders in the case. Agreed? Any problem will have stakeholders, right? अभी stakeholders कौन कौन है मुझे define कर ले इसमें, जितना छोटी सी condition दी है, stakeholders कौन कौन है? The sales managers, right? Respective managers, the HR head, right? Operations मैंने सबको ले लिया. जब मैं sales manager लिख रहा हूँ, assume that it's the manager वाला चीज. ठीक है guys? HR head हो गया, और कौन होगा? The TLs, I've assumed everything got everything in under the managers tab. ठीक है? So sales managers, line managers, operations managers, everything under there. मतलब अगर कंपनी ने टॉप कैंपसेस पे operations और finance और strategy और marketing के लिए हायर किया, everyone gets included. Do you think the MTs who have left become a stakeholder at least? भले not actively during the time I'm finding out the problem, right? So I'll write MTs. ठीक है? Indirect. So do we appreciate direct stakeholders, indirect stakeholders? Right? Because you won't be actively involving them in the due diligence that we're doing, right? Remember guys, वो लोग जो छोड़ गए कंपनी, वो वापस आने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं हम लोग, या आगे के लिए कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि आगे से ऐसा ना हो? What is my target? आगे नहीं हो, right? उनको तो कॉल करने का कोई सेंस नहीं बनता है, right? So the corporates are expected to look visionary, forward में करते हैं, right? ठीक है, एम्प्टी इंटेंजिबल हो गए, और कोई होगा? डू यू थिंक द बोर्ड, द लीडरशिप विल बी अ इनडायरेक्ट स्टेक होल्डर? Absolutely fine, right? The leadership would take an important note of it, right? Remember, top campuses की 18 lakh, right? So Gaurav, will come to that intangible वाली चीजें. Board आ गया. Can I also say the business schools that I recruited from, the placement committees or the faculties? Jaya, not directly, indirectly. So when I say the committee which structure the management program, I'm talking about the HR fraternity there. The complete talent acquisition reports to. Jasmine, look at this. So if I hired from a business school, the loyalty, the virtues of loyalty and commitment में जो 2 साल का business school का education होता होगा, वो कहाँ पे डाला गया होगा? Where would the seeds of business education ethics would have been sown? Where do you expect? The companies actually expect these seeds germinated in your B schools only, right? फेयर. सो व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट कि मुझे रात को 10 बजे केस स्टडी दी जाती थी और 4 बजे किया जाता था, वाज दैट बिकॉज द प्रोफेसर वांटेड टू टॉर्चर अस और बिकॉज द प्रोफेसर्स वांटेड अस टू बी प्रिपेयर्ड? Right, it's a kind of piloting that happens at a B school, right? Though they drag it a little too often, but that is what they're expected to do. हाँ, अगेन गौरव, डिड आई से ऐसे तो बोर्ड को ऐड करने का भी सेंस नहीं बनता है ना? डू यू थिंक एमटीज को ऐड करने का सेंस बनता है यहाँ पे? Now I'm doing when I say a stakeholder analysis, I'm putting up everything that I can create a point on. I might end up, see, 12 minute का केस होगा, 15 मिनट का होगा, I might not even come to empties. If you look at the larger discussion that will happen would be about sales manager, HR head and their committee, right? But at the end of the day, if I'm looking at a long-term solution, do you think business schools will come into picture? A long-term solution will always have B schools, right? Do we agree? हो सकता है कि business school आपने अपना talent acquisition process change कर दिया, business school उसको agree ना करे. आप बोलो कि अब की बार ना we'll also take a psychometric test. B schools might not agree, right? And when you are looking out for a possible solution to a corporate problem, do you look at a short term? Do you look at a long term? This is not ऐसा कुछ नहीं हुआ है ना कि एक शॉप में सामान नहीं पहुंचा, रास्ते में ट्रक का एक्सीडेंट हो गया इसलिए शॉप पे सामान नहीं पहुंचा. ऐसा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, राइट? दिस इज मोर ऑफ अ स्ट्रक्चरल प्रॉब्लम. This is more of a corporate strategy problem, right? Fair? So obviously, right? So we do a stakeholder analysis and we also go for a solution that is more of a long term, right? Short term में तो आप एकदम से problem को solve करोगे, but then you would also want you to be behaving like a Ayurvedic doctor or an allopathic, मतलब homeopathic or an allopathic, or do you play the dual role? So at the end of the day, it's a dual role, but you would always have your eyes set on a homeopathic role, right? कहते हैं ना कि जड़ से नहीं मिटाया प्रॉब्लम को तो दिक्कत है, राइट? पॉसिबली ये हो सकता है ना कि 70 एमटी में से 35 एमटी निकलने से पहले बोल गए हो कि मुझे सैलरी बढ़ा दो, या हमारे इंटर जो स्टेंट है, सेल्स स्टेंट है, उसको 2 महीने के बजाय 3 महीने कर दो. यू कुड हैव डन दैट. दैट्स नॉट अ बिग प्रॉब्लम, राइट? बट दैट इज सॉल्विंग द रूट और दैट इज सॉल्विंग द सिम्टम. आपने बोला यार 2 महीने का सेल्स प्रोग्राम को सर 3 महीने कर दो. We possibly learn more through a 3 months interaction than a 2 months interaction. And the HR head says, ठीक है, आप लोग एक महीने अपने प्लांट रोल में और रह लो या मार्केट में रह लो. Is that solving a symptom or something else? That's a symptom, right? And treating the symptom के साथ प्रॉब्लम क्या होगा? अगर मैंने सिम्टम में बोल दिया ठीक है जाओ भाई ले लो 1 महीने का एक्स्ट्रा. Not snashes, not every organization has an exit interview. I never had one exit interview. और वो ना फॉर्मेलिटी होती है. I never had. I mean, exit interview maybe the Indian companies don't take exit interviews very seriously, both from the company side and both from someone who's leaving the organization. Well, at least that is what I have. I can possibly clearly tell you in the situation here that there were no exit interviews. I could make this case like that. अगर मैं केस बना रहा हूं, I can write there were no exit interviews. Right? So I'm not calling them. Am I calling them or am I calling them as indirect stakeholders here? Do you think indirect stakeholders may I will call the B school perspective? हाँ गौरव, now that could come into a lot of stuffs, right? हो सकता है these empty heads would have possibly resigned purely for money. right? Matlab, those ifs and buts can always come into picture, but we're looking at the logical side of things, राइट हो सकता है सेल्स मैनेजर्स ने सबको इतना बुरा किया हो, सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट का केस हो गया हो, उसको एग्जिट कर दिया सब लोगों ने एज अ मास प्रोटेस्ट. सो दोस इफ्स एंड बट्स कैन कम इनटू पिक्चर, बट लुकिंग एट अ मोर लॉजिकल पिक्चर हियर, राइट? So the problem that I was telling you was, what were we doing? Are we looking at a short-term plugin, or are we looking at a long-term solutions here? So we're looking at something that does a short-term thing, but a long-term solution will never ever be left out. Agreed? So that gives you a good perspective. Can we do a stakeholder analysis in almost the cases that we have? It's not a very difficult thing to do, right? So now what I will be doing, guys, here is, let's do an acronym. Okay, I'm going to write an acronym here. Please be very clear on this acronym. Sa, pa, then I'll write da, and then I'll write pa. Okay, doesn't make sense abhi to bilkul bhi na. Okay, so write it down. The sa means situation analysis. Okay, this is nothing but situation analysis. Fair? What do I mean when I write situation analysis? What do you think a situation analysis is? Understanding the case explicitly or implicitly? What's the problem at hand, right? Explicitly जो problem मेरे पे hand पे, right? Jasmine, अभी हम analytical approach नहीं कर रहे हैं ना? अभी the problem, so can anyone define me the problem statement here? In one line, or in 1.5 line, or 2 lines? What is that one line? Right? No, Jaya, is that the reason of living, is finding out the analytical reasons? What is that one line which has completely brought this case? Objective होता है ना, objective or the problem statement at hand. That is how you do, right? So again, Snehashis, are we looking at reasoning of why the people left? Simply speaking, more than half of the new employees are leaving PUL, which is unlike what has been happening in the past years. Do we agree? Something that's the objective, right? Am I defining the objective, or am I defining the situation here? So situation would be the end problem that has been given to me at the end of the case, right? Do you think it would be given at the end of the case? Somehow at the end of the case, after talking about a lot of background and whatever happened? Or I could completely build this case in a reverse process. I could give you the problem right at the start and then give a background to it. I can do that, right? Both possible. That means you would have to start appreciating the way a case is written, right? That the final situation might be at the end of the case, or it might be completely at the start of the case. Agreed? I could simply say that the class of 2017 saw more than half of the people who joined PUL as MTs leaving the organization. Surprisingly is the fact that this has not been the case, and these 70 people come from some of the premier institutions of the country, right? And then I'll say the HR guy is quite worried at it. He calls a meeting of sales managers to convene from all the verticals. Imagine if you were the HR manager, how would you convene the meeting? This could have been the way. Or I could have written it, imagine you're the HR head and you find out that blah blah blah. Talk about the points that you are going to mention in the meeting and a possible course of action. Can we do that, guys? Do we understand this? Fairly fine. So do we appreciate the way cases could be written, right? So mere liye the problem, the important areas are at the start or at the end. The PA, guys, means is problem analysis. So how is the difference? What is the difference between situation analysis and problem analysis? Explicit. So what would be explicit, Snehasis, and what would be implicit? right? And reason is implicit. Fair. That's what Snehasis tells me. Let's have everyone writing something for this. Right. And problem analysis is something that you are expected to find out, right? Explicit Jaya is something which is clearly written. Implicit is something. Uh, Naga, you will actually have to go through the recording. Just give me a minute, guys. I'll just help Naga here. Fair. So, guys, what is it that you're going to spend most of your time on situation analysis or problem analysis? Right. So when you are trying to do a problem analysis, should you be acting like a homeopathic doctor or more like an allopathic doctor? More like a homeo, right? I'm not discounting the role of an allopathic doctor, but remember, allopathic doctor would possibly focus more on situation analysis, and an homeopathic doctor would focus more on what? A problem analysis, right? So long term, Snehashis, remember now we've not come down to course of action. We're still looking at problem, right? But I will be looking at a problem for which I am expected to find a long-term solution. So Abhi, let's be very specific. What we're trying to find out is the problem. What problem? The explicit problem or the root problem? The root cause, right? So now understand. Homeopathic Gaurav is someone who gives those small medicines which takes a lot of time to heal, but the bimari gets out from the jad. Allopathic doctors are normal MBBS doctors where you go to. Okay? I think that should make it clear. Okay? So what do you think, guys? A lot of people can do mistakes here is they might keep on discussing the situation, which is the easier thing to do because it's explicit. Do you agree that if we don't get into a proper framework of discussing a case, we might end up discussing situation again and again? Right? We might keep on saying the MTs have left, them try to find out why MTs have left and all that stuff. There would be a lot of chaos in the group while just doing the situation analysis. Can you quickly jump in while you're doing this case analysis and say, yes, the situation is something that is problematic, but let's do a deeper analysis and find out what the root problem is. Will that create a positive mark in the GD, in the CD? And even though you have not given a problem from your end, but then you can always set the course of the direction of the GD. And that will sound very lucrative, right? The invigilator there would actually see you as someone who defines the direction for the group. I'm not saying कि आप अपनी आप से problem analysis एक बोलो. Say, guys, we have been discussing a lot about the situation. Let's try to find out the root problem of this. Right? And if it's a 15-minute case discussion, what do you think? Situation would be 1 or 2 minutes, maximum 1.5 minutes. The problem analysis should take 6 to 7 minutes. I'm talking about everyone in the group, right? So can we do a problem analysis for this particular thing? Anticipate what could be the problem. And remember, I don't have a scope here because I've just given you a very small part of the case here. What could be problem analysis? What could be various factors that might be resulting in an empty resignation? Okay, so that's a very good point. Okay, so work-life balance could be an issue. Okay, Gaurav, would salary be an issue? So let's hold on to this. Should salary be an issue? Not really. Why not really? In fact, I'll keep it as no, because this is an entry level job, right? Plus, this is an entry level job. The company would have told you the package at the pre-placement talk, right? Package would have been disclosed. Right? So package would have been disclosed. And do you think, Gaurav, there would be a better offer for them in the first 6 months or 8 months? Do you think that's a thing I'll write first or I'll write possibly at the end of it? मतलब मैं 4-5 problem करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. I think I'll write better offers, but I'll write it at the end. Something that a very good point here is, look at the most logical point. I think there would be an expectation mismatch. Do you agree? I think this, I'm just thinking logical here. I'm just thinking logical here that whatever was shown to me on the campus premises in terms of career growth or the kind of department or the training, not interesting enough. So is the company at the fault if the work is not interesting? Is the company at a fault if the work is not interesting? Not really, right? If I can say this as a problem, it's possibly an expectation mismatch, right? Swapnil is the company would have told you, right? You have to go and sell powders in the market. That's how the company will tell you, right? But the company would have presented you to it in a good package. Do we agree? That's how companies do. And I would not be blaming companies here, guys. Do you think case discussion, I should be blaming company here? Look at it. You're sitting for a case discussion at Narsi Monji, where 2 years down the line, 7 months down the line, you would be recruited by a company only. Remember, it's important for you to not to blame anything. Do we agree? So when I say it's an expectation mismatch, who am I blaming? Am I blaming anyone, or am I blaming the expectations here? Which is a fine logical balance. Sounds a very diplomatic thing, right? I know this might not sound correct, but I have to be diplomatic when I work, right? So I'm saying that it's not the fault of MTs. It's possibly not the fault of the company. It's possibly what the company told and the prospective employees perceived. Should I be using this word perceived? Circumstantial, right? Perceived sounds a better word, right? Because इसमें मैं कंपनी को फिर blame नहीं कर रहा हूं. Right? So again, the expectations would only be mismatched if there is a communication that happens and people understand it otherwise. Right? So I am not blaming that the company was not good at communicating. I'm not saying the guys were not good at understanding. It's just the way it was communicated and possibly the way it was perceived. Fair? Appreciated, guys, the kind of words that I'm using and the kind of diplomacy that I'm bringing in. Rather than quickly jumping on the moment you stated salary, I stated hold on for your horses and think for a minute. Should salary be a problem here? I think the salary should not be a problem for MT. It has to be completely diplomatic, Jasmine. Do we agree here? I know it's a constraint, but that's how the world runs, right? I know I might not be ethical here, but I cannot be explicit here in a case discussion. Remember, after your case discussion, there might be ask you that if salary was a constraint, so you should not be looking like someone who runs after the salary, right? Fair? So that's the kind of words you would actually have to use. It's a corporative setup, right? Right, guys? So work-life balance, expectation mismatch, possibly expectation mismatch में मैं training department सबको include कर लूं, ठीक है? So now look at this. The DA would mean the decision analysis. Decision would be one or they could be more than one. When I say decision, I'm talking about possible courses of action here. There could be more than one, right? Can we do this decision analysis for now? That what could be the decision that you're making? So before going to the decision, what do you think possibly is the most problematic statement here for which MT would have been leaving the company, and be logical around it? So let's pick up one. Expectation mismatch sounds good. The communication gap, the expectation set, and the expectations that were completed. And now I am analyzing it. Remember, this is the first time this has happened. That means जब भी last time MTs आए होंगे तो शायद कंपनी का कम्युनिकेशन कुछ अलग रहा होगा ना. अगर आप एक्सपेक्टेशन मिसमैच को मान रहे हो, लोगों में एकदम से बहुत फर्क तो नहीं आ गया होगा 20 स्कूल के बैचेस में. Right? Now, this explicit or was this implied, or was this very deep thinking? Because remember, the decision analysis or the plan of action will take deep into this, na? मेरा लॉन्ग टर्म सोल्यूशन में क्या होगा कि हो सकता है कंपनी ने, दिस माइट हैव बीन वेरी लॉजिकली पॉसिबल बिकॉज द कंपनी हैज चेंज द वे इट हैज पोजीशन इटसेल्फ इन द कैंपसेस, और पॉसिबल पीपीटी चेंज हो गया, या हो सकता है एमटी प्रोग्राम का तरीका चेंज कर दिया हो, कुड बी। मैंने कहा था 2 महीने का सेल्स स्टिंट है। हाँ जया, डू यू थिंक यू वुड एक्चुअली इंक्लूड एनी एमटी हु हैव रिजाइंड? डू यू थिंक यू वुड बी एबल टू डू दैट? Do you think you're legally fine, you're legally authoritative to include them? But do you think you can do that after you have left the organization? Does an organization call you back to set its strategy? What should happen? What should happen is different. What happens? So Jasmine, the feedback will be exactly right. So the best I can do is possibly to interact with the leftover empties. But should that be my first course of action or should that be my second course of action? पहले मैं अपने को तो analyze करूंगा ना, and I should not make them explicitly a stakeholder here, right? Otherwise, you would end up treating the symptom and not the root. Do we agree here? If I straight away make them a part of it, the short term solution would be यार इन्हें खुश कर दिया, चलो अब तो हो गया, इस बार का हो गया, अगली बार का अगली बार देखेंगे। पहले तो you would discuss it with people who are the reporting authorities, right? हाँ, the second round of meeting should be with MTs. I think the MTs will come into picture when you're taking a decision. Yeah, we are analyzing the different decisions, right? The leftover MTs, someone who's still there with the company, just to give them a confidence. Do we agree? Tuhin. So this would be decision analysis. Let's start doing this in the next 2 minutes. But do we agree that the second round of meeting might include these guys who are leftover MTs and possibly giving them a confidence? You see, we have figured out these are the things which we think are creating a problem. Give us your feedback. Are we right? They might come in with their own feedbacks and a common robust analysis can be done. Absolutely right. Arrange a workshop. But Snehasis, we do agree, right, that this is going to be the second meeting after we have done the sales manager and the HR head thing, right? Now, Vivek, I don't think. Gaurav, am I discussing the problem here or am I discussing the solutions here? Right, I'm saying that this is something that we're trying to do because this will impact their life in the next 4 or 5 months, right? The whatever phase is left, would this decision impact the situation analysis is solution would impact them, right? I'm not even telling them that listen to them, matlab, take an action basis their feedback, but you should always ask them at least, right? I'm not saying execute what they're saying. Obviously the execution authority remains with you, but should you be asking because they were the ones infected by this, right? Mid-level managers don't have a problem. They're not leaving it. The senior guys are not leaving it. If the senior guys were leaving it, then that becomes a completely different story, right? The situation now is different. If the first step situation analysis is different, the complete case study takes a very different path, right? Are we clear, guys? Till now, I'm very slow. It's a kind of right pace for everyone. Fair? So do you agree that decision analysis could possibly have 2 or 3 different kind of decisions, and decision analysis could have one short term and one long term, in fact more than one short term, more than one long term? Fairly agreed, right? And I'm saying more than one short term, more than one long term because my case discussion will have 12 or 15 people, right? And everyone thinks and everyone looks at this case very differently and might have a very different perspective. Snehasis, decision analysis is no, so I'm not getting to a possible course of action. I'm talking about possible courses of action in terms of plural. Okay, I'm taking up different courses of action that could be possible and not just one here. I can further divide this decision analysis into a short-term decision, a long-term decision. Remember, this is what decision would be coming out in the boardroom meeting. Let's do this, let's do this. There would be 5 or 6 people. Can't we do this? Let's revamp the complete training program. The HR would stand up and say, we cannot do this. It's going to be a huge organizational constraint. Then we'll possibly have a way to play around with it. Agreed, guys? then there would be someone who would say, okay, fine, we will discuss the long term, but let's just try to keep these rest of the MTs engaged in the company so that at least they don't leave, because the ones who have left the organization have created a bad image. Remember, these are important things. Do you think ये सारे points आएंगे केस discussion में? राइट, मार्केट ब्रांडिंग भी खराब हो रही होगी ना, बाहर जाके कॉम्पिटिटर वाले लोग कहेंगे ना, अगली बार ब्रांड करेंगे, सी impliedly brand करेंगे ना, see they don't have a good MT, they won't say it explicitly, but obviously the things will go into the B school, right, the subsequent batches, right? So right, Snehasi, so if you look at this, guys, I'm discussing a very practical situation here, right? I'm being logical, but I'm being practical at the same time. Fair, right? Which is happening with so a lot of organizations, right? So guys, would you possibly speak out of a name of an organization name in the CD? Gaurav, don't do this, okay? I know हम लोग कर लेते हैं, we were not going to do it, right? We're not going to point fingers on anyone, right? ठीक है, you never know, there might be someone as a professor who is a consultant to Baiju. These professors play a lot of consulting roles for big organizations as well. Is the decision analysis clear as an acronym? That when I say decision analysis, I'm counting more than one decision analysis, and I could break these decision analysis into short-term and long-term decisions. Remember, I'm using plural here. The last PA, guys, is a plan of action. Now this is where the problem starts to be resolved, starts to get resolved. Do you understand plan of action में मैं क्या क्या discuss करूँगा? Would I be discussing all plan of actions for all decisions, or would I be picking up one decision out of that and planning an action around it? One decision, right? Choose and prioritize. That means I have to pick up one decision, right? Right? So one decision for short term and I guess one decision for long term. Absolutely fine. Now it makes logical sense for us. Suppose it is saying that the expectations mismatched. तो इसका short term solution क्या होगा? Plan of action. You've decided that expectation mismatch was the problem, and you have taken the decision analysis is short term में. What would you do? So Snehasis, ये तो next batch के लिए हो जाएगा. Remember, when I'm talking about the short term, I'm possibly referring to the people who are left over of that 70 people. Discuss with MTs, fair, assume, assure the remaining 30. Assurance से कुछ होता है, discussion से कुछ होता है. Snehasis, if you're doing that, are you not blaming them? Modify training curriculum, fair. So the first thing is I'll take a feedback from them and then possibly define the rest of right. Take the feedback and implement what is possible within the limits in the given constraints of the companies for the rest of the time. Do we agree? I'm not being authoritative here by employing anything that I think would be right for the expectation mismatch. At the same time, I am not being completely participative where I'm doing everything that the MTs would tell me. There has to be an authority that should come in, right? At the end of the day, I have hired them and I should be at the top. Fairly fine, guys? Right. Find a middle ground, right? It always has to be diplomatic. Swapnil, should the plan of action be more specific? Help me out. Specific can be diplomatic, right? What Snehasis tells me is find a middle ground when I'm saying that I would possibly take a feedback and find out if these guys actually like a certain thing or not. What if they don't like on the job training? मतलब फील्ड में अगर 2 दिन जाके बेचना है, देखना है किराने स्टोर से कैसे बात करनी है, they don't like it to slog in the heat. Would you completely scrap that? नहीं ना? Now that is a specific thing, right? You set the expectations right. It's not about clearing the expectations. It's about setting the expectations right. that possibly you can turn around with this, say that 2 days a week you go out for an empty sales stint in the market. For 2 days you can be in the office and learn and do a secondary research and do a lot of data crunching, right? Yes, remember I would always have to do a solve the problem of the remaining empties. Remember, I'm looking at short-term solution. It might just be the case that the rest of the 30 empties or 35 empties are almost planning to leave the organization. You can't really keep that problem. If there are meetings that are taking place to solve this problem, you have to do a short-term solution, right? वो 30 तो ना जाए at least. इतना डिस्कशन करने के बाद बाकी 30 भी चले गए तो क्या ही फायदा हुआ? फिर तो नेक्स्ट बैच के लिए सॉल्यूशन आ गया, राइट? हाँ, so setting the expectations right, we need to interact, right? Anything that, so when we're doing a plan of action here, guys, do you think then these rest over empties become an important stakeholder? Right? Then they become it, right? When we're analyzing it, possibly not, but when we're doing something that's going to affect their daily routine, we possibly need to. Fair. And a long term, possibly to, we figured out in the long term that the problem was that was actually transferred in the B school changed. Even if did not change बहुत ज़्यादा, we'll possibly try to find out, right? So Swapnil, we are talking to B school representative, or should we be talking to the talent acquisition team, the campus engagement team? Sneha sees, my conversation would be with B school representative or talent acquisition. Do I talk to B school representative as to what they expect from us, or do I define my acquisition policy according to what my organization sets policy as? We talk to only talent acquisition, right, guys? We don't talk to a B school representative for a long term. Remember, your organization has a dedicated department called talent acquisition, and they'll change their PPT. The B schools will possibly have no say in it. Do you think the B schools should have a say in defining how do you present your PPT? Absolutely, right? We need to hire according to our requirements and not. Swapnil, is that the right thing to do from the MT side? If I go back and be a crybaby in front of my B school, would my B school even give a shit to it? I've graduated. They were there to give me a degree and not a placement. Right? My B school MDI gave me a PGPM. Obviously, the placements come with a package there, but they are not morally responsible, right? In fact, Karan, remember, placements are not even ethically or legally binding on them, right? What is binding on them is a quality education and a degree. Do we agree? I paid 12 lakhs for a degree for experience, not for the placement. Right? Obviously, the company wants to have a good relationship with the B school and vice versa, but the B school should not ideally dictate your placement policies. Absolutely right. I can possibly go out in the market and talk about bad words about the company. My B schools will not possibly have a very good stake. All that I'm saying is that I'll go to my talent acquisition, look at the current PPT, compare it with the kind of presentation that I had before this batch, and then possibly figure out a solution here, right? Do we agree? That there needs to be a benchmarking with the way the communication was executed in the batch previous to this, and that could possibly help me out to come with a plan of action. Now look at this, guys. The last thing that in the class that I'm going to tell you is SMART. So the acronym SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. Do we get this? SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So what am I trying to tell you here is that every plan of action should come under this. What if I change my communication? How should I measure its success? Whether this change of communication has been a success for me or not? How do I measure it tangibly? Next time ke starts, right? So next time when the empty stint ends, I'll possibly look at so Sneha says that's counted, right? So we have figured out that the communication was a problem, and if I have changed the communication, I wanted to see if the if the plan of action that I did is reaping results for me or not. Remember, Jasmine, so I've stated that I've figured out that the communication was a problem. I've changed the communication. that was what my learning was. I still do not know. Remember, I'm picking up the most logical reason here. I change my communication. How do I see whether the communication change has impacted this complete problem in a positive way? How do I see that? Is obviously it's a long-term thing, right? It would only be tested by the next batch or by the 2 next batches. So what I'll see is if I hired 70 people, how many people are now leaving it? Right? That means this was an aberration because of the communication mismatch. That means I possibly hit the right areas. Everything is experimental, Snehasis, right? You pick up the best out of the possible experiments that you have picked up, right? So because you cannot directly impact someone's behavior. You always go for the best solution here, right? The case discussions are always picking up the best thing. No, I understand you were telling me it's about picking the best problem. When I say best problem, the root problem, and picking the best solution for it. Agreed? Okay. So guys, what I'm going to do is I know the class will end at 10:02 and you might not even realize and I'll be logged out. So we'll continue from here. I am going to say a couple of more points about SMART. How do you put up specific, measurable, attainable and all. We'll continue with this case only. Just to take a quick small feedback, where we fine with it? Did you get a clarity on what case discussion is? And do you think this SAPA DAPA would help you to put this complete thing into a structure? Remember, not everyone will actually have this structure to them. Or even if the structure is not respected by the group, T is time bound, Gaurav. You're not going to pick up this empty wali thing in PA is plan of action, the final plan of action, and the final plan of action needs to be tested under SMART, right? You can always pick up decision analysis and also do a SMART analysis, but that will take a lot of time. Swapnil, that will depend on how do you enforce your points in the CD. What if I tell you, see, guys, the case is very clear in front of us. I would expect that the complete group to do a situation analysis and then let's go to the problem, find out different decisions from different group members and then stick on a plan of action. Can I do that right at the start of it? Will it create a good impact on the rest of the group and the newsletter as well? I can do that, Jasmine. Why can I not do it? You can set a course to you can set a direction to the case discussion, right? And that's a very good hack. You have not even stated anything about the case, but then you can use this anytime for any case. You might not get a hang of the case, but you have made up a point, right? Remember teamwork. So Jay, why don't you be the one that, right? So I'm not teaching all the NMIMS call getters here, right? I'll do that, Snehasis. We'll do that. We'll do that. I'll take up 2-3 cases. Gaurav, that makes logical sense, right? You won't come out with a decision analysis without finding the problem, right? The problem needs to be identified first. तभी तो decision लूंगा. Decision ले लिया, problem पता ही नहीं है. वो तो फिर politicians हो गए हम लोग, right? कुछ भी करना है, जो impact करे ना करे, मुझे पैसा खाना है. तो फिर वो वाली बात हो जाएगी, right?